Good evening or good afternoon. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about Chapter 6 today. But before we launch into Chapter 6, talking about price level and inflation, I want to kind of give a roundup of what we've seen chapters 1 through 4, and then also Chapter 5. We talked about growth, measuring growth, domestic product, real domestic, gross domestic product. So a lot of attempts at measuring growth. So, but let's back up just a little and think about that production possibility curve. So remember, it's concave to the origin. If you're on the production possibility curve, factors of production are fully fixed. You're producing at the most efficient rate possible, and you have full employment of your factors of production. And when you say full employment, it's not just labor. It's not talking about employment in terms of the unemployment rate and some things you'll study in one of the later chapters, but we're talking about full employment of all the factors of production. And that puts that economy sitting right there on that production possibility curve. Now, if you're not fully efficient in your processes and you're not fully utilizing all your scarce resources, it's going to put you at a spot between the origin down here where the X and Y axis meet and that concave production possibility curve, and it's not going to allow the economy to grow to its full potential. If you are outside, or if things change, growth allows you to move to a point that's outside or extends beyond that production possibility curve. Because in the past, that point that's outside the production possibility curve, we couldn't attain it. We couldn't attain it because our factors of production were always fixed. That was the assumption we made. So growth in the economy, growth in the factors of those, one of those factors of production allows us to move out to that point C that's basically extending that efficient frontier, extending that production possibility curve to allow us to attain a higher level of growth. Also, remember that GDP measures the impact of growth on the well-being of society. It's our best guess, even though there are issues with GDP, it's our best guess at determining the well-being of the society within a given nation. Also, remember that nominal gross domestic product, or nominal GDP, it's a combination of consumption, so consumer consumption, investment, and the investment is investment in capital stock so that you can extend and work toward the future and also ensure growth. It's government purchasing, which, as we talked about in Chapter 5, is definitely not the same as government spending, because government spending includes all these transfer payments. And then lastly, it's net exports. And net exports is simply exports of the companies exporting out to foreign countries or outside of their borders and boundaries, minus the imports, goods and services coming in, and that gives us the net export. And then along in Chapter 5, we decided that gross domestic product, even though GDP is the term you hear with the talking heads, that they're like Fox or CNN or Wall Street or MSNBC, any of those talking heads, that's what they're talking about, and it's nominal GDP. Nominal GDP means it's a summation of all the goods and services at the current quantity and also at the current price. And then we decided to get a true picture of how the economy was producing. Let's take and we're going to adjust that by prices. So to get the real GDP, you're taking the quantity at their current levels, and you're going to multiply it by a price that's pegged or tagged back to the base period. And then finally, they talked for a few minutes about real GDP per capita. So basically real GDP divided by a population. And all of this is working our way toward what macroeconomics means, or what macroeconomists do. They're answering those questions. Are we producing what we're capable of producing? And are we providing material comfort to society or the people in society, the the population of a nation, or you can also look at it as the consuming public. So that's what we're trying to answer as macroeconomists. Now, one thing, and you'll see this thread. We saw the thread in chapter 5 that GDP certainly not perfect. Depends a lot on data points, information. All of that information and data points might not always be as accurate as possible. As we get into talking about price level and information, you're going to see concerns about as we calculate inflation. And then in the next chapter, I think it's chapter 7, you're going to get into unemployment, the employment rate. And again, we're talking about issues with data. So chapters 5, chapter 6, chapter 7, we're talking about how data impacts the calculation process or the estimation process. That kind of gives everybody a feel for what we summarize from chapter 5, how it's going to move into what we're going to do with chapter 6, because in chapter 6, we're going to start measuring that price level. We're going to start understanding what inflation means. And it's going to be especially informative because remember, real GDP makes adjustments to take out the impact of price levels and inflation. So that's kind of a precursor to where we're going to get in chapter 6. I'll be back in a few minutes and we're going to talk about kind of measuring prices and inflation. Talk to you soon.